How significant were the voyages of Christopher Columbus? The voyages of Christopher Columbus were significant because with this were discovered a new world, and new opportunities of commerce were developed. The frontiers of Spain were expanded, and in that moment the sun was not set in the empire of Spain. It is still important because Europeans and American natives already have an exchange in items since the discovery, for example, potatoes, tobacco, Christianity, etc. The Spanish language has evolved, adding many words and uses from the New World, and today is the second language most spoken in the world. Since the discovery in 1492, continuous migratory movements has been produced. Firstly, from Europe to America, and now from America to Europe. These migratory movements has caused new races like mestizo between natives and white people, mulattoes between African and white people, and bowleted between natives and African people. And actually, those races are mixed between them. Who was Christopher Columbus? Christopher Columbus was a navigator, cartographer, and explorer, and there is a controversy about where he was born, but generally agreed that Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa in 1451. His objective was to develop a plan to travel to the Indies by sailing directly west across the Atlantic Ocean. He had difficulty obtaining support for his plan because Europeans saw that Earth was flat. Columbus presented his plan in 1455 to King of Portugal. John II submitted the proposal to his experts, who rejected it. In 1488, Columbus appealed to the court of Portugal once again, but they declined their initiative because not long afterwards, Bartolomeu Diaz returned to Portugal following a successful rounding of the southern tip of Africa. So, with an eastern sea route under its control, Portugal was not interested in traveling a western route to Asia. Then he traveled to both Genoa and Venice, but they also refused his initiative. He had sought an audience from the monarch of Spain, Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. Columbus presented his plan to Queen Isabella, and after 2 years of negotiations, he finally had a success in 1492. The voyages of Christopher Columbus. The first one. On the 3rd of August in 1492, Columbus departed from Palos de la Frontera, Spain, with 3 ships, Santa Maria, La Niña, and La Pinta. They were property of Juan de la Costa and the Pinzon brothers, Martín Alonso and Vicente Yáñez. Columbus first sailed to the Canary Islands, where he restocked the provisions and made repairs. On September, he departed from San Sebastián de la Gomera to begin a 5-week trip across the ocean. Rodrigo de Triana was the sailor who sighted land at 2 a.m. on the 12th of October in 1492, aboard La Pinta. Columbus called the island San Salvador. From one of his first contact with the American natives, Christopher Columbus wrote in his journal that many of the men I have seen has a scar on their bodies, and when I made signs to them to find out how this happened, they indicate that people from other nearby islands come to Salvador to capture them. They defended themselves the best they can. I believe that people from the mainland come here to take them as slaves. They ought to make good and skilled servants, for they repeat very quickly whatever we say to them. I think they can very easily be made Christians, for they seem to have no religion. The second trip. Columbus left Cadiz on the 25th of September in 1493 to find new territories with 17 ships carrying supplies and about 1,200 men to colonize the land. The Spanish monarchy pretended to initiate colonization. For that, Castilian crown ordered Columbus that he help the Catholic conversion, the good treatment to the American natives, and promote the commerce of prime materials, which is what's going to be a monopoly between the Castilian crown and Columbus. In the first trip, Columbus already noticed the potential riches of America. I was attentive and trying to know if there was gold, and I saw some of them had a piece hanging in a hole they have in the nose. And I understood that by signals that going to the south or coming back to the island to the south, there was a king who had great vessels of this, and it was very much. But there were evidence that during this trip, natives were enslaved and murdered. Hundreds were rounded up and shipped to Europe to be sold. Third voyage. The expedition was divided into two groups. One departed on February in 1498 and the second one departed on May in the same year from Sanlúcar de Barrameda. Columbus was accompanied by Bartolomé de las Casas, who would later provide transcripts of Columbus' diaries. The objective of this trip was to find solid ground, because in the previous they landed in islands. They firstly landed on the island of Trinidad on 31st of July, but later, on August, he explored the Gulf of Paria, which separates Trinidad from Venezuela. And after that, he explored the mainland of South America, including the Orinoco River. Columbus has found uprising and he was going to lose his power. Finally, in 1499, the Castilian crown removed from him the monopoly about the commerce and the discovery, authorizing other expeditions which were known as the Minor Voyage. The fourth trip. Christopher Columbus did not want to do this trip due to his health problems. Despite this, he eventually accepted to compete with Portugal and their new success, the discovery of Brazil. Columbus departing from Seville on the 13th of April in 1502, and they landed at Santo Domingo on the 29th of June. Last years. In his later years, Columbus demanded to Castilian crown give him 10% of profits made in the New World. His request was rejected, but after his death, his family demanded in the Pleitos Colombinos for part of the profits from the commerce with America. Christopher Columbus died on the 20th of May in 1506 in Valladolid.